More tips, resources, daily motivations, and to listen to archive shows, go to the website bunnyslippersarevil.com. There you will also find links to our show's Facebook page and Twitter handle, and our YouTube channel. If you are listening live, you can call in with your questions at 347-202-0929. Again, that number is 347-202-0929. And now a word from our sponsors. Evil Bunny Consulting is the alternative to expensive outplacement. They give company-sponsored job seeker workshops as well as a one-on-one job seeker boot camp. For more information, go to www.bunnyslippersarevil.com. Resume Edit is the low-cost, high-quality resume writing company with resumes as low as $35, written by certified resume writers. You can find them online at www.resume4edit.com. Or call 404-860-2473. And be sure to tell them you heard about them on the Bunny Slippers of Evil Job Seekers podcast. Let 3dresumes.net turn your resume into a web page with a customized domain for 12 months for only $30. Help hiring managers and recruiters find you, make your resume available 24/7, and get a free professional personalized email address just for your job search. You can see my online resume at tyronegriffin.com, and for more information on how to get your own, go to 3dresumes.net. If you are thinking or about to look for a job in today's world, you will find a new reality in the job search process. The world has changed. Job search today is much more complicated than 5 years ago. Volumes of resumes, more applicant screening systems, depersonalized applications, panel interviews, team hiring, long, complicated applications, branding, and social media. Yes, the world has changed. But have you? Are you still trying yesterday's approach? Why struggle and miss out on today's opportunities? Career Oyster is here to help. Great coaches, the latest resources, unique strategies personally tailored to your job search. Find out the new reality and how you can prevent costly mistakes. To register for a free 45-minute private session with head coach Howard Cattie, go to careeroyster.com. Find out the facts now. You'll be glad you did. Remember their motto, the world is your oyster, be the pearl. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome. I hope you had a good week. Great week here. Everything's going well. We are continuing. A few weeks ago, if you remember, we had our career coach Howard Cattie, and we talked about resume tips, and we didn't finish. So we got Howard back today. Howard, are you there?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me well, Tyrone?
Ooh, let me turn it up just a little bit. Okay. Hold on one second, Howard. Okay, you there?
Is it? Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, Howard. Thank you. How you doing?
Oh, that's much better now. I finally can hear you. I thought I might have to redial back in. Okay, we're good?
Oh, no, yeah, we're good. We're good. Yeah, I had to put it on speakerphone. That was my fault. But how are you, sir?
Okay. Good morning. Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you very much.
That's good. That's good. Well, you are a frequent. You was just going to say you are a frequent visitor, and as always, we do appreciate your coming on here and helping us. So let's get right to it. Let's first quickly review what we covered last time: keywords and content, etc.
Yeah, we talked about resumes, right?
Right.
And, we talked about what makes an exceptional resume, and one of the key characteristics of it has to be a selling resume, as opposed to a biographical history.
Yep.
In other words, the resume has to present what your skills are and and point to where you're going to. So it's very important to have the resume be keyword based.
Mm-hmm.
The resume must be clear in its presentation of your accomplishments and skills. It must look nice. It must have a good appearance so that the person reading it, who doesn't really read it, they scan it. It makes it easy for them to figure out what you're looking for, what you have done, and why you're qualified. And then finally, the content has to be persuasive. The content can't just be a list of tasks, or a lot of times you'll read a statement, increase productivity by 20%. What does that mean? A hit quota 12 times, or doubled my percentage of sales in this area. None of that really communicates anything. It's not a clear story. So the content should say, doubled my quota by by adding new accounts, selling office supplies and products, and therefore generated $40,000 a month ongoing or something like that. That way I know the products, I know the industry, I know the expertise you did, and I know the result. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Thank you. You know what I always say about job search is just like dating, and you don't start off trying to pick up a date by telling them what you've done for who else you've dated. I know it sounds silly, but when you think about it, it's like, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, what's interesting, resumes are, you'll get a million opinions on resumes, and most of them won't be agreeing with mine today, and that's okay with me.
Yep.
I'm a contrarian when it comes to resumes, and I disagree with much of the prevailing opinion out there for sales and marketing reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read resumes, like when I do some things, for speeches or whatever, if I look at 100 resumes in a room, 50% of them shouldn't be sent out, 40% of them are adequate, and about 10% are exceptional.
Mm-hmm.
And that's based on my 30 years of background reading resumes as a professional recruiter and then career coach.
Mm-hmm.
So based on that observation, I would say, and since most of those resumes went out and tried to follow prevailing opinions, I would say there's a lot of prevailing opinion that is out of date, not current, and downright wrong. So there's where I start from. So that's a disclaimer up front.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me give you an endorsement. You did my resume or gave me tips on it about 4 or 5 years ago, and I can honestly say I have gotten a lot of positive feedback in interviews because of my resume.
I'm glad to hear that.
And it has helped in interviews get down to what's important. That interview tips, that's a workshop you did, and that's a story for another time. But between that and the resume workshop, I tell you, I've never had better interviews than I have after working with you. And I don't.
Thank you.
I mean that sincerely. We can talk about it another time, but the point is, the resume and the interview tips you've given me help me in interviews get to what's important. Period. What is important to the hiring manager, what is important to the recruiter, and we had conversations about what's important instead of what I've done. So that's an endorsement from me, just my own personal experience with what you've done for me. So I want to thank you there. So that is one of the big reasons why I always ask you to come back, because I know what you say and what you do for people works. So anyway, enough of the commercial. I know career.
I think I need to get off.
CareerOyster.com. Last thing I'm going to say. Okay, so so anyway, okay. So let's talk about. So we covered what we reviewed. Here's a question: what format, in your opinion, is most effective? What resume format works the best, or gets the best response?
Yeah, this is a simple answer. The answer is it depends.
Yeah.
So there's a million schools of thought, but the prevailing opinion, by a long shot, especially propagated by recruiters who want to screen people out, is that a chronological resume is the best format to use. And that means reverse chronological. And that way you put your last position first and go backwards,
Right.
et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
I have used chronological resumes since the early 80s. That used to be, in my opinion, the standard, and it works pretty well when people have pretty consistent track records.
Right.
But I would tell you, I actually used a hybrid chronological resume, which is where you put a professional summary, not just some fluff, but actually some bullet points of accomplishments on the first page, and then started the chronology. And I still use that for certain people or certain skills. And certain people with a lot of times in the IT space, it works probably better than anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
The second kind of resume, which everybody talks about, is a functional resume. And the functional resume emphasizes your expertise or your background, and that's where it's not as chronological, but trying to put your best skills forward. I actually use a variation of that, my own variation, and I use that probably 95% of the time. And I'll tell you why. Because if you're interested in a lot of people making job changes where they're transitioning, the functional resume is better. Mm-hmm. If you want to emphasize your abilities and skills and expertise versus just the biographical history, the functional works better. Mm-hmm. If you want to have, if you have a job objective that's different than your last title or your last skill set, a functional resume works better. If your experience is gained in multiple jobs, or some of your best experience was in the previous job, or even a job on page 2 with 3 of the resume, a functional resume works better. Mm-hmm. And so I have created a new format I call a forward-looking resume, where I look at what our objective is, and many people feel that you shouldn't put an objective on a resume. Well, I disagree with that also, as I mentioned, being a contrarian. But if your objective is one thing, your resume and a forward-looking resume should be written from the perspective of pointing everything you did or do or want toward that objective. So that's the kind of resume I write 90% of the time, and I use a functional approach. Because if you think of a sales and marketing problem, you want to put your best features and benefits on the page, not necessarily every feature and benefit on the page. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. You know, as you were talking, I was thinking about something. You know, the whole chronological resume, the idea is, I think, you know, people want to know where you worked. And that's fine. People want to know, you know, that you've worked in some place. But the real question, and I said it earlier, the real question a hiring manager or a recruiter really wants to answer is, what can you do for me?
Correct.
I mean, you know, the pretty paper. You know, back in the day when we used to have to, you know, make sure your resume, your cover letter, your business card, and your envelope was all the exact same paper. You remember those days? And we spent a lot of money. I mean, going to the dollar store or whatever back then, Caldors, and getting paper, and then taking it to a professional printer, you know, and you know, paying them a lot of money to print off 50 copies of your resume on this nice, crisp paper. You know, we did all those. You remember we did all those things. We, you know, make sure everything matched, and make sure your signature on the bottom of your cover letter, you know, was spotless. You know, that you could read it, that it wasn't like, you know, no insult to doctors, but you know, prescription pad. But my point is, all that stuff we did, but the real question that hiring managers, recruiters have always wanted answered is, what can you do for me? And I take it over, like I said, it's like dating. When you meet a new person, they got one question: what can you do for me? You know, I mean, when you met your spouse, she was attractive, whatever, but at the end of the day, you're thinking, you know, I don't care who we've been with, you know. So yeah, that what forward-looking resume with a summary, you know, I agree with you. And, you know, I think the summaries and the objectives, they kind of ground you so that to me, they give the impression that you gave some thought to this. You know, that you really did give some thought to putting this all on paper.
you'd be surprised. I mean, and if you go out and Google on the internet, you go to a lot of these networking meetings, whatever. They all talk this chronological and action words and past tense and write your accomplishments up in the past or whatever. And a lot of even resume writers, they'll just say, well, give me a history or give me your accomplishments in your past job. Suppose the accomplishments in the past job don't relate to what you're trying to do in the next job.
Yep.
How many of those you want to write down that will talk yourself out of the job? You see, it's really not a biographical history. It's not supposed to be about the past. A resume is supposed to be a prospectus. It's where I'm going in the future. And the objective at the top, or at least the implied objective by using titles at the top, is the goal. So now, the only things that should be in that resume and should be rewritten to emphasize why you're qualified for the new position, not necessarily something you're very proud of in the past because you did it in the old position. It's a marketing document, not a history document.
Yeah.
And that's the big change.
Yeah. I totally agree with you.
Now I'll give you another examples on that where people will say, you know, well, I don't want to write things that are 10 years old on my resume or something like that. That's another big prevailing idea out there. The last 10 years is the only thing that counts, right? Well, that may be interesting, but you know what? I have my IBM background, which was in the 70s, God forbid. And I put that on every bio, every resume, everything I do. Why? Because it's a marketability factor. It makes people take notice. The fact that I was made the IBM cut is a marquee company. If I was a big 5% or a name brand company, that is a mark of acceptance and excellence, like a degree.
Right.
So to leave that off a resume is a huge mistake because it gives you credibility.
No, I agree with you.
That doesn't mean you have to write a big description, but you have to have that on your resume somewhere to put that on there. So each person you have to look at. And I make sure that IBM background, even though it's so long ago, my first commercial job, it doesn't matter. I make sure it shows up on the page one. Why? Because it gets attention.
Yeah.
The fact that I was a VP in Source, a VP in Romag, you don't even know those companies.
Right.
But IBM, he's an IBMer.
Well,
so that's my point about marketability.
And you know what? You say that, and it's very true. I've seen titles on people, and going through LinkedIn, and you'll see some titles, and you've never heard of the company. And real quick story, way back when I first got out of college, way long time ago, in the last millennia, actually. I remember I went out on a date with somebody. And, I was 23, she was 23. And she was she gave me her card. Her card said vice president of something or other. And I was like stunned. I guess maybe I was 24. And I remember being stunned. I'm like, you think this person is a vice president at 24? Wow. What am I doing wrong? I'm an analyst. What am I doing wrong? And, what the reality of it was she worked for a Wall Street company where, they were, back in those days, they used to make cold calls, for investors. And what they did was everybody on the floor, there were, 50 people on the floor at a phone bank making calls. All of them had the title of vice president. Okay. Yep. Out of college, you're a vice president for the simple, and the reason they did that was so that if you were a potential investor and you got a call from somebody, when they gave you their card, it said vice president. It was a shell game, So, I tell that story to say that a lot of titles, sometimes you can't go by them. I mean, I've had a manager position. The title was manager. And I was a kind of glorified data analyst, but my title was manager. And I mean, I was running code, I was pulling SQL, I was doing analysis. I had nobody under me, but my title was manager. But the nature of the job I did, it was an analyst job. But this company wanted to call us managers and pay us a little more, and we're not going to fight that. So But anyway, I'm sorry, rat hole.
Now let's take the since you brought those up. Let's take that to how that relates to a resume. So the person that is the vice president title decides to look for another job. So what do they put down on their resume? Vice president.
Yep.
So now anybody who's interviewing them or looks at the resume gets misled, and they have a sales role that they're applying to, but the person that reads the resume says they're overqualified or just rejects them based on that.
Yep.
So what they should do is they should recognize that the title was inflated. There was a reason for it. But instead, they should use the term, investment representative or something that makes them qualify for the position they're going toward, not what they did in the past.
Yeah. And particularly if you have a title of vice president on your resume and you're looking for a sales role or some lower level role in a company, people are going to wonder, why are you trying to look this far down? What are we missing?
Yeah, well, there's two problems. One is she's really not qualified to be a vice president somewhere else.
Yeah.
So she uses the title. They're going to figure that out and reject her. Second of all, is she's thinking herself overqualified for the role she should be looking at, which is a salesperson. So either way, it's a mistake. So titles, you have to, again, if you're not looking at your target, you'll put down whatever you want to put down in the past, and it may not help you one bit on the resume. It'll rule you out in different places. A perfect example of how you're not thinking in terms of a sales and marketing problem. The resume is supposed to be a sales and marketing document.
Okay. Let me jump to this next question. I don't want us to run out of time again. We have a tendency to do that, but and we kind of touched on this already. But give me some of the common mistakes people make on their resumes. We've already talked about it.
I'll give you a couple of quick ones, and then we'll get to maybe a one or two that are kind of a little different. And I've gotten some of these from professional recruiters inside of large major companies. And one of them happened to have been Google that sends out some guides for writing resumes that somebody wrote, has prevailing opinions on it. But we'll talk about a couple of them. So one of them is typing errors, of course. Well, there's a question about, somebody said there might be 50% of the resumes have a typing error. That's gets some people irritated, but if you're a smart hiring manager, you say, all right, I don't like that, but the reality is, what are they capable of doing?
Yeah.
And you look past it. The second thing is length. This is the biggest argument I hear because nobody reads resumes. That's a fact. I never read resumes. I scan resumes. So therefore, the misconception is let's keep resumes 1 to 2 pages. Some people are generous and say, well, if you every 10 years, let's put a page up for every 10 years. Personally, I write 3-page resumes 90% of the time. I don't write anything bigger than that, or I'll put an addendum on it. And the reason is why? Because you may say they don't read the resume, but a resume has many more purposes than to get you in the door. And when you're looking at a bunch of resumes after you leave the building, then the one that's 1 page long versus somebody that's 3 pages long, they will say the 3-page person looks stronger than the 1-page person. So the key in a resume is not the length at all. In fact, my college resumes have 2 pages. It violates every rule of every college in the country. Why? Because the second page, I put a lot of personal attributes and examples and some things that are behavioral oriented that give them an edge. And the reality is, when I write college resumes, they look stronger than the other 1-page boilerplate resume. And they get the job. And so the key is the first page of the resume. It's the front page of a newspaper. What does the front page say? And if I like something on that front page, you know what? I'll turn to page 3 to find out the details, just like you would in a newspaper. If you like a side headline or a bullet point on a newspaper that says see more at page 12A, guess what you'll do? You'll go to 12A. So is really not the issue. It's content and the first page. The next thing is you could talk about formatting, 10 points minimum, white space needs to be in, use a doc format. Those are obvious. The reason you have to use a doc format is so that it can be read by the applicant tracking systems.
Mm-hmm.
Do not put contact information in a heading. People put contact information in a heading. The applicant tracking systems don't read that information. Therefore, you're not pulling. It's not pulling out names and things like that. So in some cases, you might be left out, or they can't find you, or they can't find your zip code, or you get left out of searches. You don't use the heading or the footer.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. Now, here's an interesting one that I thought was cool. Confidential information such as company names. Some companies, when you work for them, make you sign a confidentiality agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And the intent of that is so you don't give out information about their company to other people, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. I've signed them and I've enforced them in my own company.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a little bit of an overreach when it says you can't say who you work, if you have clients or who you're working for. That gets to be a little bit an overreach, especially if those clients would help you get a job.
Mm-hmm.
So some companies could argue that that's part of our confidential information. I'm working for IBM, and the fact that I'm doing business with KPMG or somebody else or Deloitte, that's not something I don't want to know. I think it's an overreach. I wouldn't do it. I'd take my chances and put it out there because the benefits to me of having Deloitte on my resume as somebody I've worked with is so much more significant than not having that mentioned. And the reality is I don't have to convey sales numbers or confidential data or things like that, but you definitely want to show that you want to definitely have that marquee company mentioned. So to say that you've done business with Microsoft is not a big deal. To say you've done business with Walmart is not a confidential big deal. It is a big marketability factor. So I disagree with people to say to leave the companies off. You must protect confidential information, but you certainly can have a little bit of leeway there to talk about what your capabilities are.
Hey, Howard,
Does that make some sense?
it makes sense. We're gonna have to do a part 3 of this. Because I got about 2 minutes left, and as always, I don't want you to leave without being able to tell people where to reach you, what you're doing, what you got coming up. Okay?
Yeah, good. Guess what? I'm working on about 3 or 4 webinars right now.
Okay.
And they'll be available. They have to do with the myths about interviewing, the myths about resume writing, so it would be a continuation of this
90
topic.
seconds.
And anybody that would like to attend them, just go to careeroyster.com and sign up for the webinars.
Okay.
I'm also doing right now a lot of free consultations for people, and you can sign up for them on my website. And some new networking ideas and materials and capabilities that are a part of my program. So everybody needs a coach in some case. Love to see your coach.
Seconds.
Come and find out what we could do for you personally in a free consultation.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem. I want to apologize. I, as a host, one of the things I need to do a lot is sometimes just shut up. And you and I, we always have this problem. We can't do it in one show because it just you get.
I'm guilty too. I'm guilty.
No. But you give some great information. I'm just like the color commentator, the guy between the plays that's talking about stuff. But I need to ask you as always, and I know you're probably going to say, will you come back first of all?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's figure out a day. We'll finish this up.
Yeah.
And, it's a topic.
It is, man. What I'm going to do is I'll give you a call in a little bit after and send you the link. But for everybody else, thank you for the show, for listening. We're going to end this now before I get cut off. Howard, thanks again, and I will be talking to you soon, okay?
Take care.
All righty. Bye-bye.